The drover's wagon creaked to a stop at the bend in the road where the stone house sat alone against the hillside. And Vincent Parlow climbed down with the kind of weariness that came from watching a woman half his size carry a coffin she should not have had to carry at all. The burial had taken most of the afternoon. He had expected family, neighbors, someone from the valley settlements below, but only Greta Denmar had stood at the graveside with him, her green skin ashen in the fading light, her small tusks pressed against her lower lip as she spoke the words over her mother's body. The plot sat behind the house in a stand of mountain ash, 4 generations deep by the look of the weathered stones, and when she had patted the last shovelful of earth into place, she had simply stood there, silent, staring at nothing. He had not known what to say then. He did not know what to say now as he unhitched the ox and led it to the water trough by the barn. The house door stood open, warm light spilling into the yard, and he could see her moving inside, a shadow among shadows. Vincent filled the trough and checked the hitch on his wagon bed, calculating distances. If he left now, he could make the crossroads in by full dark, sleep in a real bed, and be in Milford by noon tomorrow to collect payment for the timber he had hauled last week. It was the sensible thing. The professional thing. He was halfway to the door to say his farewells when Greta appeared in the doorway. She was small for an orc woman, barely reaching his shoulder, with a slender build that made her look fragile in the oversized wool dress she wore. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid during the digging, and dirt still streaked her hands despite the basin of water he had seen her use earlier. Her eyes, amber and red-rimmed, fixed on him with an intensity that made him stop. "The hearth cannot go dark tonight," she said. Her voice was steady but hollow, like something recited from memory. "Clan law. Someone must sit with the fire until dawn on the first night, or the dead cannot find peace." Vincent glanced past her into the house. The fireplace dominated the far wall, a massive stone structure that probably heated the whole building in winter. A chair sat beside it, worn smooth by years of use. "Your family will be coming then," he said. "No." The word came flat and final. "They will not." He waited, but she offered no explanation. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the evening wind rustling through the ash trees. "I helped carry the coffin," she said finally. "I dug the grave. I spoke the words alone." Her fingers twisted in the fabric of her dress. "Stay until morning. I will not ask for more." There was no demand in it, no expectation. Just a request, naked and desperate, from someone who had already spent the day learning exactly how alone she was. Vincent looked at his wagon, at the road winding down into darkness, at the sensible choice disappearing into the night. Then he looked at Greta, at the way she held herself upright through sheer stubbornness, and felt something shift in his chest. "All right," he said. Relief flickered across her face so quickly he almost missed it. She stepped back from the door, gesturing him inside. The house was smaller than it looked from outside, one large room with a sleeping loft visible above. Herbs hung from the rafters in bundles, filling the air with sage and thyme. The furniture was simple but well made, everything worn smooth with use and care. A spinning wheel sat in one corner, half-finished wool still on the distaff. The hearth held a good fire, crackling cheerfully, oblivious to the grief that saturated the walls. Greta moved to the table where bread and cheese sat on a wooden board. "Are you hungry?" "I could eat," Vincent said, because it seemed easier than refusing. She cut the bread with precise movements, her hands steady now that she had something to do. Vincent took the chair by the fire, the one that was clearly meant for watching, and accepted the plate she brought him. The bread was dense and nutty, the cheese sharp enough to make his eyes water. Greta did not eat. She moved around the room like a ghost in her own house, touching things. Her mother's shawl draped over a chair, a pair of worn slippers by the hearth, a clay cup on the mantel half full of something long gone cold. "She died 4 days ago," Greta said suddenly. "In the night. I woke and she was already gone." She picked up the cup, stared into it, set it down again. "The fever came fast. 1 week she was working the orchard, the next she could not stand." "I am sorry," Vincent said, because what else could he say? She was 63, not old but not young either. Greta's fingers traced the rim of the cup. "She told me once that when my father died, his family sat vigil for 3 days. The whole clan came. They filled this house so full people had to stand outside." She laughed, a broken sound. "I sent word to her cousin when she took ill. He never came. Sent a boy with a note saying they would pray for her recovery." The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. "They did not come today either," she continued. "No prayers, no vigil, just empty hills and one human drover who happened to be passing through when I needed help carrying a box." Vincent set his plate aside. "Why did you stay here? If they abandoned you, you could go somewhere else. This is my home." The words came fierce and immediate. "My mother's home, her mother's before that. We have worked this land for 40 years. The pear trees in the orchard, every one of them we planted. The stone wall along the eastern field, we built it. The well, the barn, the smokehouse, all of it. I will not leave because they decided we are not worth remembering." She turned away from the mantel, wrapping her arms around herself. "I should not burden you with this. You stayed to watch the fire, not to hear me talk." "I do not mind listening," Vincent said. Greta looked at him then, really looked, as if seeing him for the first time. "Why did you stop? When you saw me struggling with the coffin this morning, you could have kept driving. Most would have." Vincent considered the question. "My father died when I was 16, he said slowly. "Logging accident up north. The men from the camp helped me bring him home, helped dig the grave, but after that they left. Had to get back to work. My mother and I sat alone that first night, and I remember thinking how wrong it felt, how empty." He met her eyes. "Nobody should have to sit alone on a night like this." Something in her face softened. "What was his name?" Victor Parlow." The name still hurt after all these years, but less than it used to. "He was a good man, terrible singer but good." "My mother was Dara," Greta said quietly. "Greta Denmar. She could make anything grow. People used to say she could stick a dead branch in the ground and it would sprout leaves." She smiled faintly. She sang to the trees, silly songs about rain and sunshine. I used to be embarrassed when the peddlers came through and heard her. She sounds like someone worth remembering. She was. Greta's voice cracked on the words. She turned back to the mantel, gripping its edge. "I am sorry. I promised I would not ask for more than your presence, and here I am talking your ear off." "You are not asking for anything," Vincent said gently. "You are just talking. There is a difference." She nodded but did not turn around. Her shoulders shook once, twice, and then she drew a long breath and straightened. When she faced him again, her eyes were wet but her jaw was set. "There is tea if you want it," she said, "and blankets in the chest if you get cold. I will be in the loft if you need anything. I will be fine." She nodded and moved toward the ladder, then paused with one foot on the lowest rung. "Thank you," she said without looking back, "for staying, for all of it. You are welcome." She climbed to the loft and disappeared from view. Vincent heard the creak of ropes as she settled onto what must be a bed, then silence. He fed the fire and settled deeper into the chair. It was a comfortable chair, shaped by years of use to fit a body slightly smaller than his. Outside, night creatures called to each other across the hills. The fire popped and hissed. Vincent watched the flames and thought about empty houses and lonely vigils and small orc women with more courage than family. Somewhere past midnight, he heard her crying, soft and muffled, trying not to be heard. He stayed in the chair and kept the fire burning and pretended not to notice. Dawn came gray and cold, painting the hills in shades of silver. Vincent woke stiff and sore, his neck protesting the night spent upright. The fire had burned low but not out. He added wood and coaxed it back to life, then stood and stretched, working the kinks from his spine. Greta descended from the loft as the sun cleared the eastern ridge. She had changed into different clothes, practical trousers and a tunic, and her hair was properly braided again. Her eyes were still red but dry. "You stayed," she said. "I said I would. People say many things." She moved to the hearth and ladled water from a pot into 2 cups, adding herbs from one of the hanging bundles. "Thank you." She handed him a cup. The tea was bitter but warming, cutting through the morning chill. "The vigil is complete," Greta said formally. "You have fulfilled the custom and honored my mother's memory. I will not keep you longer." It was a dismissal, polite but clear. Vincent should have taken it, should have finished his tea and climbed onto his wagon and gone about his business. Instead, he found himself asking, "What will you do now?" "Work the holding. Same as always." She sipped her tea, not meeting his eyes. "The pears will be ready for harvest in a few weeks. I have winter preparations to make. Firewood to split, stores to lay in, the usual, alone." "I have been alone before, not like this." Greta's jaw tightened. "I will manage," Vincent set his cup down. "I am sure you will." He moved toward the door, then paused. "I pass through this area every month or so. Timber runs from the high country down to Milford. If you need anything, heavy work or repairs, you could leave word at the Crossroads Inn. They know me there. I do not need charity. I am not offering charity. I am offering labor for payment. You have pears, do you not? I will work for a share of the harvest." She studied him, suspicious. "Why would you do that?" "Because I have 2 hands and a strong back, and you have work that needs doing. That is how trade works." For a moment he thought she would refuse out of sheer stubbornness. Then she nodded, once short and sharp. "If you are in the area, I will not expect you." "Fair enough." He left her standing in the doorway and drove his wagon down the winding road to the valley below, and tried not to think about how small she had looked against the stone house, or how quiet it must be when night fell. 3 weeks later, Vincent found himself at the Crossroads Inn with a load of pine planks and no particular hurry to deliver them. The innkeeper, a round-faced woman named Marta, greeted him with her usual efficiency. "Denmar girl left word for you," she said as she poured his ale. "Said if you were coming through she could use help with the harvest." "When did she leave the message?" 4 days ago. Came down herself, looked half dead on her feet." Vincent frowned. "Sick, just worn, trying to do everything herself, I expect." Marta shook her head. "Shame about her mother. Dara was good people, even if she was green." "Even if," Marta had the grace to look embarrassed. "You know what I mean, not like the raiders from across the mountains. Civilized." Vincent had heard that particular justification before. It never sat well. He finished his ale and paid, then asked, "The cousin who did not come to the funeral. You know him, Greta Denmar." "Oh, has a big holding 3 valleys over, twice the size of Dara's place. Does well for himself." Her expression soured. "Came through here last week asking questions about the old Denmar place. Who was working it, who held the deed, that sort of thing." "Why would he care now? Inheritance, probably. Place has been in the family for generations, and Greta is unmarried. Under clan law, I hear it gets complicated when there is no household, just a single woman." Marta leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Between you and me, I think he is waiting for her to fail. Easier to claim the land if she abandons it." Vincent felt something cold settle in his stomach. "She is not going to abandon it. Good for her. But that does not mean he will not try something anyway." Marta straightened, wiping the bar. "You heading up there? I said I would help with the harvest." "Well, take her some of those apples in the basket by the door. They are getting soft anyway." Vincent took the apples and headed north into the hills. He reached the stone house near midday and found Greta in the orchard, balanced on a ladder picking pears. The trees were heavy with fruit, their branches bending under the weight. She worked methodically, filling basket after basket, her movements efficient despite the obvious exhaustion in her frame. She did not notice him until he spoke. "You are going to fall off that ladder." Greta startled, grabbing the ladder for balance. "What are you doing here?" "You left word you needed help. That was days ago. I thought you were not coming." She climbed down, wiping sweat from her forehead. Her face was thinner than he remembered, her eyes shadowed with tiredness. "I came as soon as I got the message." He held up the basket of apples. "And I brought tribute." She almost smiled. "You did not have to do that." Marta said they were going soft. Consider it a favor to her, not you. This time she did smile, faint but real. "Well, in that case." She took the basket and set it on the ground by a pile of others, all full of golden pears. "I have 6 more trees to finish, then I need to sort the fruit. Bruised ones for cider, good ones for storage and sale. Show me what to do." They worked through the afternoon, Vincent on the ladders, Greta on the ground, sorting and storing. The work was hard but simple, and after a while they fell into an easy rhythm. Greta did not talk much, but what she said was sharp and practical. Which branches to avoid, how to tell when a pear was ready, where to stack the baskets for maximum air flow. As the sun began to set, they hauled the last baskets into the root cellar beneath the house. Vincent had to duck to clear the doorway, but inside the space was surprisingly large, shelves lining the walls, already half full with preserves and salted meat and root vegetables. "Your mother put all this up?" he asked. "We both did." Greta arranged the pears carefully, rotating older stock forward. "Every autumn since I was tall enough to reach the counter. It is a lot for one person to maintain. It is a lot for 2 people to maintain. That is why I needed help." She stepped back, surveying the shelves. "The cider press is next, 3 barrels worth if the bruised fruit holds out. I can stay tomorrow if you need me." She looked at him, surprised. "What about your deliveries? They can wait an extra day. I cannot pay you for 2 days' work with a share of the harvest." "Then pay me in cider when it is ready," he shrugged. "I am not particular." Greta studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You are a strange man, Vincent Parlow, so I have been told." She shook her head but did not argue further. They climbed out of the cellar into the cooling evening, and Greta disappeared into the house while Vincent tended his ox. When he came back inside, she had laid out food. Bread, cheese, cold meat, and some of the apples he had brought, sliced and drizzled with honey. They ate at the table, the silence between them comfortable now. Outside, darkness settled over the hills like a blanket. "Marta said your cousin was asking about the holding," Vincent said eventually. Greta's jaw tightened. "Garrett, of course he was. Is he going to cause trouble? Probably." She pushed food around her plate without eating it. "Mother always said he resented her for keeping this place. It was supposed to go to his father originally, but when my grandmother died, she left it to my mother instead. The younger daughter. Garrett never forgave her for that." "Can he take it from you?" "Not easily. Mother wrote a will leaving everything to me. But under clan law, holdings are supposed to pass to households, not individuals. Garrett could argue that I am not a proper household on my own." Her fingers tightened around her fork. "He would have to bring it before the circle, get a judgment. It could take months. What happens in the meantime? I keep working. I keep living here. I prove I can maintain the holding." She met his eyes. "And I pray that is enough." Vincent heard the fear beneath the determination. What would happen if you married? Then it would be a household and he could not touch it. She said it flatly, without emotion. But I am not going to marry some stranger just to satisfy a legal requirement. I would rather fight. Fair enough. She blinked, clearly expecting more argument. When none came, she relaxed slightly. You really do not care, do you, that I am orc? Why would I? Most humans do. Most humans are idiots. She laughed, startled and genuine, and the sound transformed her face. For a moment, she looked young instead of worn, alive instead of merely surviving. They finished the meal in silence, and Greta showed Vincent to the small room off the main house that she used for storage. She cleared space on the floor, brought blankets and a pillow, and left him to settle in. Vincent lay awake for a long time, listening to the old house creak and shift around him, and wondered what he was getting himself into. The next day they pressed cider, a messy, sticky process that left them both covered in pear juice and laughing despite the hard work. Vincent set up the press while Greta prepared the barrels, and together they crushed basket after basket of bruised fruit into sweet, sharp liquid that would ferment into something potent by winter. Mother used to sell this at the spring markets, Greta said as she sealed the third barrel. Traders came from 2 provinces over for Denmar cider. You should do the same, maybe. She wiped her hands on her apron. If I still have the holding come spring, you will. You sound very certain. I am. Vincent tapped the last barrel into place. You are too stubborn to let him win. Stubborn. She tilted her head, considering. I suppose that is one word for it. What word would you use? Desperate. The honesty of it caught him off guard. Before he could respond, Greta turned away, busying herself with cleanup. They worked until dark, then cleaned up and ate another simple meal. This time when Greta showed him to the storage room, she hesitated in the doorway. Thank you, she said, for coming back, for helping. You did not have to, I know. Then why did you? Vincent considered lying, saying something about trade or convenience or good business sense. Instead, he told the truth. Because I kept thinking about you up here alone, and it bothered me. She absorbed that in silence. Finally, she nodded. Good night, Vincent. Good night. She closed the door softly, and Vincent settled onto his makeshift bed, and wondered when exactly he had started caring what happened to Greta Denmar. He left the next morning with promises to return in a few weeks, and a basket of pears Greta insisted he take. The drive to Milford was long and gave him too much time to think. He had lost his father at 16 and his mother 3 years later to winter fever. He had been alone since then, moving from job to job, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to put down roots. It had seemed easier that way, safer. No attachments meant no one to lose, but Greta's loneliness called to something in him that he had thought long buried. The way she held herself together through sheer will. The way she faced impossible odds with her jaw set and her back straight. The way she smiled, rare and precious, when something genuinely amused her. He told himself it was just sympathy. Fellow feeling for someone in a difficult situation. Nothing more. He almost believed it. 3 weeks later, Vincent found himself taking a longer route on his return from the northern lumber camps, one that happened to pass the crossroads in. No new messages waited for him there, but Marta mentioned that Greta Denmar had been through again, this time with a clerk in tow, making copies of land records. Vincent drove to the stone house without bothering to justify it to himself. He found Greta on the roof, patching shingles. She waved when she saw him, then climbed down with the careful movements of someone who had been working too hard for too long. More harvest help, she asked, if you need it, or I can fix that sagging beam in the barn. I noticed it last time. The beam would be useful. She pulled off her work gloves, studying him. You are coming by a lot. I told you I travel this route regularly. There are other routes. Not as scenic, she snorted. Vincent, I live on a rocky hillside with more sheep than people. It is not scenic. I like sheep. You are impossible. But she was smiling. Come on, I will show you the beam. They spent the afternoon in the barn, Vincent bracing and repairing while Greta handed him tools and supervised with the critical eye of someone who knew buildings inside and out. The work was hot and dusty, but satisfying in a bone-deep way that driving a wagon never quite managed. Where did you learn carpentry? Greta asked as he planed a new support beam. My father. He worked timber camps, but he knew building too. Said a man should be able to fix what breaks. Vincent tested the fit, then reached for his hammer. What about you? This is good work, the way this barn is put together. My mother and I built it. Well, rebuilt it. Original barn burned when I was 12. We salvaged what we could and started over. She ran her hand along a support post. Took us 2 years, working whenever we could spare time from the fields. I hated every minute of it then. Now I am glad I learned. You did well. We did well. The correction was soft but firm. Mother designed it. I just followed instructions. Vincent heard the grief in her voice and changed the subject. Marta said your cousin was looking at land records. Greta's expression hardened. He filed the claim. Got notice 3 days ago. The circle meets at autumn equinox to hear it. That is less than a month away. I know. She sat down on a hay bale, suddenly looking exhausted. I have been trying to find proof that Mother intended the holding to pass to me. Letters, witnesses, anything. But most of it was just between us. Spoken words do not count for much in a legal dispute. What about the will? It helps, but Garrett is arguing that clan law supersedes individual wishes. That the holding should pass to a proper household, which means him and his family, not me alone. She rubbed her face. His lawyer is good. Very good at making me sound like a foolish girl playing at farming while the holding falls apart around me. That is not true. Truth does not matter much in a legal fight, only what you can prove. She looked up at him. I am going to lose, Vincent. The holding, the orchard, the house. Everything my mother and grandmother and great-grandmother built. Because I am not married, and I do not have a man to sign the papers that say it is a proper household. The bitterness in her voice was corrosive. Vincent set down his hammer. Then find proof. You said it yourself. Spoken words were witnessed by someone. A neighbor, a trader, a traveling healer. Someone must have heard your mother say she wanted you to have this place. I have asked everyone I can think of. No one remembers anything useful. She stood, pacing. And even if they did, Garrett has money for lawyers and time to drag this out. I have neither. You have the land. You have the work you have put into it. That counts for something. Not in a legal chamber, it does not. Vincent wanted to argue but could not find the words. He had seen legal battles before, watched poor farmers lose land to rich neighbors over technicalities and paperwork. The law favored those who could afford to manipulate it. They finished the beam repair in grim silence. When Vincent left that evening, Greta stood in the doorway and watched him go, and the defeated slump of her shoulders stayed with him all the way to Milford. He should have let it go. It was not his fight, not his problem. Greta was a client at best, an acquaintance, someone he had helped a few times out of basic human decency. But that night in his rented room above the Milford warehouse, Vincent lay awake and thought about empty houses and lonely vigils and small orc women facing down the world alone. He thought about his own years of drifting, never planting roots, never risking connection. He thought about the way Greta smiled when something amused her. The way she talked about her mother, grief and love tangled together. The way she held herself straight even when the weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders. Somewhere in the small hours of the morning, Vincent admitted to himself that he had stopped thinking of her as a client weeks ago. He spent the next day asking questions in Milford's Market Square. Traders who worked the hill country, peddlers who traveled the remote holdings, anyone who might have passed through the Denmar place in recent years. Most had nothing useful to offer. A few remembered Greta Denmar, spoke of her kindly, but none recalled any specific conversation about inheritance. He was about to give up when an old woman selling herbs grabbed his sleeve. "You asking about the Denmar place?" she said. "Yes, did you know Dara?" Knew her well enough. "I am a midwife. Worked these hills for 40 years. She squinted at him. "Why are you asking?" Vincent explained the situation carefully, watching the woman's expression shift from curiosity to outrage. "That bastard Garrett," she spat. "Always was a greedy pig. His father was worse." She leaned closer. "I delivered that girl, Greta. Difficult birth, Dara nearly died." Soon as she could speak again, first thing she said was make sure Greta gets the holding. "I remember because she made me write it down, sign it, date it. Said she did not trust Garrett's side of the family not to make trouble." Vincent's heart hammered. "You still have that paper?" "Should do. I keep records of all my deliveries. Custom of the trade," she frowned. "It would be near 25 years old by now, might take some finding." "Would you look for it?" "Might, if I knew it was going to help that girl and not line some lawyer's pocket. It would help Greta. I swear it." The midwife studied him for a long moment. "You sweet on her." Vincent felt heat climb his neck. "I am trying to help a friend." "Uh-huh." The old woman grinned, showing gaps in her teeth. "I will look for the paper, come back tomorrow." Vincent returned the next day to find the midwife triumphant, a yellowed piece of parchment in her gnarled hands. The writing was spidery but legible, Greta Denmar's mark alongside the midwife's signature, and a date 24 years past. "This is it," Vincent said. "Binding as any will in the eyes of clan law," the midwife confirmed. "Birth testament, mother's first instructions for her child, supersedes anything that comes after unless she wrote another one." She did not, or Garrett would have mentioned it. Vincent carefully folded the parchment. "Can you testify to this at the circle?" "I can, and I will." She jabbed a finger at him. "But you make sure that girl knows what she is worth. Denmar women have been making that land bloom for 4 generations. She has more right to it than any man, cousin or not. I will tell her." Vincent rode hard for the stone house, the precious parchment tucked safely in his coat. He arrived after dark and found Greta still awake, working by lamplight at the table, surrounded by papers and ledgers. She looked up when he burst through the door. "Vincent, what is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong." He pulled out the parchment, set it on the table in front of her. "Read this." She read, her eyes widening. "This is my birth testament. How did you find this?" "A midwife in Milford. She delivered you, kept records. Your mother made sure you would inherit Greta. She planned for this 24 years ago." Greta read it again, her hands shaking. "This will hold up in front of the circle. Birth testaments supersede later wills in clan law, and the midwife will testify." Vincent sat down across from her. "You have proof?" "Real, documented proof that your mother wanted you to have this place." For a long moment Greta just stared at the parchment. Then she looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "You found this. You went looking for it." "I asked some questions." "You went to Milford and spent days tracking down witnesses for a problem that is not yours." Her voice cracked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I care about you. Because I cannot stand the thought of you losing everything. Because somewhere along the way you stopped being a stranger and became someone I cannot stop thinking about." Vincent did not say any of that. Instead he said, "Because it was wrong. What your cousin is trying to do, it is wrong, and I could help make it right." Greta wiped her eyes with the heels of her hands. "I do not know how to repay you for this." "You do not need to repay me." Vincent, Greta. He reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. You do not owe me anything. I helped because I wanted to. Because you deserve to keep what is yours. She stared at him, her amber eyes searching his face for something he could not name. Then she did take his hand, her calloused fingers wrapping around his. Thank you, she said, for all of it, for staying that first night, for coming back, for this. Thank you. Her hand was warm in his, strong despite its size. Vincent felt something settle into place in his chest, something that had been unmoored for years finally finding anchor. You are welcome, he said. They sat like that for a long moment, hands clasped across the table, the lamplight making warm shadows on the stone walls. Then Greta cleared her throat and pulled back gently. You must be exhausted. Rode all the way from Milford today. Worth it to see your face when you read that parchment. She smiled, shaky but genuine. Stay tonight, it is too late to go anywhere and you look dead on your feet. I can sleep in the storage room, Vincent. Her voice was soft. You can sleep in a proper bed, the loft has room, I trust you. The offer touched something deep in him. All right. She showed him up to the loft, a simple space with a large bed and a smaller pallet, both neatly made. You take the bed, Greta said. I will take the pallet. Absolutely not. This is your house. And you are my guest. They argued briefly, then compromised on Vincent taking the pallet. It was still more comfortable than the storage room floor. And as he settled in, he could hear Greta breathing quietly a few feet away, already asleep or pretending to be. He lay awake for a while, listening to the house settle around them, and felt strangely content despite the hard floor and uncertain future. Whatever happened at the circle meeting, they would face it together. The thought should have frightened him. Instead, it felt right. The next few weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Greta organized her documents, rehearsed her testimony, sent word to the midwife about the date and time of the circle meeting. Vincent stayed at the holding more often than not, helping with the work and offering moral support when the stress threatened to overwhelm her. They fell into a comfortable routine, working side by side during the day, eating together in the evenings, talking late into the night about everything and nothing. Vincent learned that Greta could quote poetry, loved terrible puns, and was terrified of spiders despite being twice their size. Greta learned that Vincent had wanted to be a teacher before his father died, still carried his mother's wedding ring on a chain around his neck, and could whistle any tune after hearing it once. They did not talk about what would happen after the circle meeting. Did not discuss the fact that Vincent was spending more time at the holding than on the road, or that Greta's eyes sought him out whenever he entered a room, or that the space between them seemed to shrink a little more each day. The night before the circle meeting, Greta could not sleep. Vincent found her in the main room near midnight, pacing in front of the cold hearth. You should be resting, he said. I cannot. My mind will not stop. She wrapped her arms around herself. What if it is not enough? The birth testament, the testimony, all of it. What if Garrett's lawyers find some loophole? Then we will figure out the next step. There is no next step. This is it. Her voice rose with panic. If I lose tomorrow, I lose everything. The house, the orchard, the land. Everything my mother built, everything she gave her life to, just gone. Vincent crossed the room and took her by the shoulders. Listen to me. You have proof. Legal, documented proof that this land is yours. Garrett has nothing but greed and a good lawyer. You are going to walk into that circle tomorrow with your head high, and you are going to fight for what is yours. What if I am not strong enough? You are the strongest person I know. The words came fierce and immediate. You buried your mother alone. You worked this holding through grief and exhaustion. You stood up to your family when they abandoned you. You are strong enough for this. Greta looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "You really believe that?" "I know it." She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his chest. Vincent wrapped his arms around her carefully, feeling her shake with the effort of holding herself together. They stood like that for a long time, her breathing gradually slowing, the tension easing from her frame. "Stay tonight," she whispered. "Like that first night, I know it is asking too much, but I do not want to be alone." "I will stay." She pulled back, looking up at him. "Not in the loft, here. By the fire." Vincent understood. She was not asking for comfort or company. She was asking for the same thing she had asked months ago, someone to sit vigil with her through the dark hours, to keep the shadows at bay. "I will light the fire," he said. He built up the hearth while Greta fetched blankets, and then they settled into the chairs on either side of the flames. The fire crackled between them, warm and bright, pushing back the darkness. "Tell me something," Greta said after a while. "Something about your life before you started driving freight." Vincent thought back. "When I was young, maybe 8 or 9, I wanted to be a cartographer. My father brought home a map once from the city, all these detailed drawings of mountains and rivers and roads. I thought it was magic, how someone could take the whole world and make it small enough to hold in your hands. Did you try it?" "Oh yes, terrible maps. I could not draw a straight line to save my life." He smiled at the memory. "But I loved the idea of it. Exploring places, documenting them, showing other people how to get there. You still do that in a way, you travel the roads, know all the routes." "I suppose, though my maps are mostly in my head these days." He glanced at her. "What about you? What did you want to be before the holding claimed you?" Greta was quiet for a moment. "A scholar. I wanted to study at the university in the capital, learn history and languages and mathematics. My mother used to get books from traveling merchants, and I would read them until they fell apart." She smiled faintly. "Ridiculous, really. A green-skinned girl from the hills thinking she could sit in lecture halls with human nobles. It is not ridiculous. It is practical. The university does not accept orcs. Even if they did, we could never have afforded it." She shrugged. "I made my peace with it. The holding is a good life, honest work, good land, more than many people have. But not what you wanted. We do not always get what we want." She met his eyes across the fire. "Sometimes we get something better." The weight of the words hung between them. Vincent wanted to ask what she meant, wanted to say the things that had been building in his chest for weeks, but the moment did not feel right. Tomorrow was too important, too fragile to complicate with feelings neither of them had fully acknowledged. So instead he said, "Tell me about the pear trees. You said you and your mother planted all of them." Greta seized the safer topic gratefully, and they talked through the night, trading stories and memories, keeping each other company as the fire burned low and rebuilt and burned low again. Somewhere around dawn they both dozed off, Vincent in the chair, Greta with her head pillowed on her arms at the table. When the sun rose, they woke stiff and tired but together, and that felt like enough. The circle met in a stone hall in the valley, a round building with benches arranged in tiers around a central floor. Vincent had never attended a clan gathering before, and the formality of it surprised him. Elders in formal robes, clerks with heavy ledgers, observers filling the back rows. This was serious business, the machinery of law and tradition grinding forward with careful precision. Greta sat in the petitioner's seat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Vincent sat in the observers section, close enough to see her but too far to offer support. Greta Denmar sat across the floor, flanked by 2 lawyers in expensive clothes, looking smug and confident. The presiding elder, a woman with iron-gray hair and sharp eyes, called the session to order. "We are here to settle the matter of the Denmar holding," she said. Greta Denmar claims the property should pass to him as senior male member of the clan and head of a proper household. Greta Denmar contests this claim, asserting her right as named heir. Each party will present their case. Garrett's lawyers went first, arguing eloquently about tradition and proper household structure, about the importance of clan cohesion and the dangers of allowing holdings to pass to unmarried women. They painted Greta as well-meaning but unprepared, a girl playing at farming who would inevitably fail and bring shame to the family name. Greta's jaw tightened, but she did not react. She waited, patient and still, while they tore apart her life and work with polite, poisonous words. When they finished, the elder turned to Greta. "Your response." Greta stood. "I have maintained the holding for the past 6 months alone since my mother's death. Before that, I worked it alongside her for 24 years. I know every tree in that orchard, every stone in that wall, every inch of that land. I have the knowledge, the skill, and the will to keep it productive and profitable." She pulled out the birth testament, holding it up. "And I have this. My mother's first instructions, spoken the day I was born, witnessed and signed by the midwife who delivered me. She wanted me to have the holding, not as a favor, as my right." She handed the parchment to the elder, who read it carefully. Murmurs ran through the observers. "This is a birth testament," the elder said. "Where did you find it?" "A friend helped me locate the midwife who wrote it. She is here to testify to its authenticity." The midwife stood, introduced herself, and confirmed the document's origins. Her testimony was clear and detailed, leaving no room for doubt. Garrett's lawyers tried to poke holes in it, questioning the validity of a 24-year-old piece of paper, but the elder waved them off. "Birth testaments are binding under clan law," she said. "This document is properly witnessed and signed, unless you have evidence it was falsified." The lawyers had no such evidence. Garrett's face darkened with anger. The elder consulted with the other circle members in low voices, then turned back to the room. "This circle finds in favor of Greta Denmar. The holding passes to her as rightful heir, according to her mother's wishes and clan law. The claim is dismissed." Relief crashed through Vincent so hard he had to grip the bench to stay upright. Across the room, Greta's shoulders sagged, her face crumpling for just a moment before she pulled herself together. The elder was not done. "Furthermore, Greta Denmar is ordered to pay the costs of this hearing, and to formally acknowledge Greta Denmar's right to the holding in front of this circle." Garrett stood, his face purple with rage. "This is absurd. She is a single woman, unmarried, no household. No, she is the rightful heir," the elder interrupted, her voice sharp. "Acknowledge it or face censure." For a long moment Garrett looked like he might refuse. Then his lawyers whispered urgently in his ear, and he ground out, "I acknowledge Greta Denmar's right to the holding." "So witnessed," the elder said. "This matter is closed." The circle dispersed, people filing out in groups, already gossiping about the outcome. Vincent pushed through the crowd to Greta, who stood frozen in the center of the floor, staring at nothing. "You won," he said. She looked at him, dazed. "I won." "You won." Then she laughed, bright and disbelieving, and threw her arms around him. Vincent caught her, lifting her off her feet, laughing with her. Around them people stared, but he did not care. Let them stare. Greta had won. She had kept her home, her land, her mother's legacy. That was all that mattered. The midwife appeared beside them, grinning. "Told you that paper would hold up." "Thank you," Greta said, pulling back from Vincent but keeping one hand on his arm. "I cannot thank you enough. Thank your young man here. He is the one who came looking." The midwife winked at Vincent. "You did good, boy." She left before Vincent could correct the young man label. Greta did not seem to notice or care. She was still smiling, radiant with relief and joy. We need to celebrate, she said. Something. I do not even know what, but something. Whatever you want, Vincent said. What Greta wanted, it turned out, was to go home. They rode back to the holding in comfortable silence, the autumn sun warm on their faces, the worst of the crisis finally behind them. When they reached the stone house, Greta stood in the yard for a long moment, just looking at it. "It is really mine," she said softly. "No one can take it away." "No one," Vincent agreed. She turned to him. "I could not have done this without you. The birth testament, the support, all of it. You saved my home. You saved your home. I just helped you find the proof." "Vincent." She stepped closer, her expression serious. "Why did you help me? Really, this was it." The question he had been avoiding for weeks, the truth he had been dancing around since the night she asked him to stay until morning. He could deflect again, make it about justice or fairness or simple human decency, or he could be honest. "Because somewhere between that first vigil and today, I stopped being able to imagine my life without you in it," Vincent said. The words came slow and careful, each one important. "Because I care about you. Because when I think about the future, you are in it. Because he stopped, the word catching in his throat. Greta's eyes widened. "You what?" "I love you," he said simply. "I love your stubbornness and your strength and the way you smile when you are surprised. I love how you talk to the pear trees when you think no one is listening. I love that you face impossible odds with your jaw set and your back straight. I love you, Greta. And I am sorry if that is too much, too fast, but it is the truth." She stared at him, her expression unreadable. Vincent braced himself for rejection, for the inevitable explanation that she cared for him but not like that he had misread the situation. Then Greta closed the distance between them and kissed him. It was not a gentle kiss, not tentative or questioning. It was fierce and claiming, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him down to her level. Vincent wrapped his arms around her and kissed her back with everything he had been holding inside for months. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Greta rested her forehead against his. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have for a while now. I was just too afraid to say it." "Afraid of what?" "That you would leave. That this was just kindness on your part, helping someone in need, and once I did not need help anymore, you would move on." She looked up at him, vulnerable in a way he had never seen her. "Everyone else did. I am not everyone else." Vincent cupped her face in his hands. "I am not going anywhere, not unless you want me to." "I do not want you to," her voice was fierce. "I want you to stay, not just until morning. Not just for the harvest or the winter or until the next crisis. I want you to stay. For how long? Permanently." The word hung between them, huge and terrifying and perfect. "Are you asking me to move in?" Vincent said, wanting to be absolutely clear. "I am asking you to make a home here." "With me?" Greta's hands tightened on his shirt. "I am asking you to build a life here, to work this land together, to be a household. A real one, not just a legal fiction. I am asking for everything, Vincent. And I know it is a lot. And I know we have not talked about it. But after today, after almost losing all of this, I do not want to waste any more time pretending I do not want you here." Vincent thought about his wagon, his freight runs, the life he had built around never staying anywhere long enough to get hurt. It would be easy to panic, to say this was too much too fast, to retreat into the safe loneliness he had cultivated for years. But when he looked at Greta, at the hope and fear warring in her eyes, at the home she had fought so hard to keep, he felt nothing but certainty. "Yes," he said. "Yes to all of it." Her smile could have lit the whole valley. "Really, really." He kissed her again, softer this time, sealing the promise. "I will need to settle my contracts, sell the wagon, move my things. It might take a few weeks." "I can wait a few weeks." She laughed, giddy with relief. "I can wait as long as it takes." They stood in the yard, holding each other, as the sun climbed higher and the pear trees rustled in the breeze, and the old stone house waited patiently for them to come inside. Vincent spent the next 3 weeks tying up loose ends. He sold his wagon and ox to another drover in Milford, settled his outstanding contracts, and packed the few possessions he cared about into a single trunk. It was strange, dismantling a life that had felt so permanent, but also freeing. Every item he sold or gave away felt like shedding weight, making room for something new. He returned to the holding on a crisp afternoon in late autumn, his trunk strapped to a borrowed horse. Greta was in the orchard, bundled against the cold, pruning the trees for winter. She looked up when she heard hooves, and her face transformed with joy. "You came back," she said, as if there had been any doubt. "I said I would." She helped him carry the trunk inside, and together they made space for his things among hers. It was a small house, but it felt bigger with 2 people filling it warmer. That night they cooked together, a chaotic affair that involved too many cooks and not enough counter space, and ate by the fire while planning the winter work. "We should rebuild the chicken coop before the snow comes," Greta said, "and the western fence needs reinforcing, and I want to expand the root cellar if we have time." "We will make time," Vincent said. She tested the word, smiling. "I like the sound of that. So do I." They worked through the autumn and into winter, settling into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Vincent learned the intricacies of pear cultivation, the art of grafting and pruning and pest management. Greta taught him to read the weather in the shape of the clouds, to predict frost by the way the sheep huddled, to coax the best flavor from cider by controlling fermentation temperature. In turn, Vincent taught her carpentry, showing her how to read wood grain and choose the right tools, how to build things that would last. Together they rebuilt the chicken coop, reinforced the fences, and started planning a small workshop for the spring. The neighbors who had ignored Greta's grief began appearing at the door, curious about the human man who had moved into the Denmar holding. Some were genuinely friendly, bringing welcome gifts and offers of help. Others were clearly there to gossip, to judge, to see if the scandal was as shocking as rumored. Greta handled them all with quiet dignity, introducing Vincent as her partner, making it clear he was staying. Most accepted it gracefully. A few muttered about impropriety and tradition, but even they could not deny that the holding looked better than it had in years, the buildings sound, the orchards thriving. Winter settled over the hills like a blanket, soft and deep. The work slowed, and Vincent and Greta spent long evenings by the fire, talking and reading and simply being together. They learned each other's rhythms, the small habits and preferences that make up a shared life. Vincent discovered that Greta hogged blankets and woke early, that she sang off-key while cooking and had strong opinions about cheese. Greta learned that Vincent snored when he slept on his back, that he had a terrible sense of direction despite years of travel, and that he could fix almost anything given enough time and the right tools. They also learned how to fight, how to navigate disagreements without destroying the careful trust they had built. The first real argument came in late winter, over something trivial that escalated into a broader discussion about decision-making and partnership. It ended with both of them apologizing, setting boundaries, agreeing to communicate better. It was messy and uncomfortable and entirely necessary. Through it all, the holding thrived. The sheep produced healthy lambs in the spring. The pear trees bloomed on schedule. The root cellar stayed full, the buildings stayed sound, and the land responded to their joint efforts with abundance. By the time spring arrived, it felt like they had always lived this way, 2 people building something lasting together. One evening in early spring, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the hills, Greta said, "We should get married." Vincent looked at her, surprised. They had talked about the future in abstract terms, made plans for the holding, but never discussed formalizing their relationship. "Is that a proposal?" he asked. "I suppose it is." She turned to him, her expression serious. "I want to marry you, Vincent, not because of clan law or inheritance rules or any practical reason, because I love you and I want the whole world to know it. I want to stand in front of everyone who ever doubted me and say this is my husband, this is my household, this is my life, and I chose it. When you put it that way, how can I refuse?" Vincent took her hand. "Yes, I will marry you, just like that, just like that." He kissed her knuckles. "Though I should probably have a ring or some romantic speech prepared." "I do not need any of that." She leaned against him. "I just need you." They married 3 weeks later in the orchard, among the blooming pear trees, with the midwife officiating and a small crowd of neighbors witnessing. Greta wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her smaller frame, and carried wildflowers from the meadow. Vincent wore his best clothes and his mother's ring on a chain around his neck, visible above his collar. The ceremony was simple and beautiful, old clan traditions mixed with human customs, creating something uniquely theirs. When the midwife pronounced them married, Vincent kissed his wife under a canopy of white blossoms, and the world felt perfectly, impossibly right. The celebration afterward was held in the stone house, neighbors bringing food and drink, the main room packed with people who had finally decided to show up. It should have bothered Vincent, seeing all these people who had abandoned Greta in her grief now celebrating her happiness, but Greta seemed genuinely pleased they had come. "They are here now," she said when he mentioned it. "That is what matters." Vincent supposed she was right. Holding grudges would not build the community they needed to thrive in this remote place. Better to accept the support offered, even if it came late. The party lasted until well past midnight, music and laughter filling the house that had been silent for so long. When the last guests finally left, Vincent and Greta collapsed into bed, exhausted and happy. "We did it," Greta said, curled against his side. "We are really married. We really are. Do you regret it?" Vincent thought about the question, about his years of wandering and loneliness, about the chance encounter that had brought him to a stone house on a hill and changed everything. "Not for a second," he said. Greta smiled and kissed him, and they fell asleep tangled together, the house settling around them like a satisfied sigh. The years that followed were not without challenges. Drought one summer, a hard winter that killed 2 of the oldest pear trees, illness that swept through the valley and left them both weak for weeks. But they faced each challenge together, leaning on each other's strength, and came through stronger for it. The holding prospered under their joint care. Vincent built a proper workshop and started taking woodworking commissions from neighboring farms. Greta expanded the orchard, grafting new varieties onto the existing trees, experimenting with different fruits. Their cider became famous across 3 provinces, and traders began making special trips just to purchase barrels of Denmar vintage. 3 years after their wedding, Greta discovered she was pregnant. The news terrified and delighted them in equal measure. They prepared frantically, building a cradle, stocking supplies, consulting with the midwife about every detail. Greta worked through most of the pregnancy, slowing only in the final weeks when her balance became unreliable. Their daughter was born on a summer morning, arriving with a lusty cry that echoed through the house. She had Greta's green skin and pointed ears, Vincent's brown eyes and dark hair, and a set of lungs that suggested she would never be ignored. They named her Tessa. Vincent held his daughter for the first time and felt something fundamental shift inside him. This tiny person, this perfect combination of him and Greta, represented everything he had never known he wanted. A family, a home, a future that stretched beyond the next freight run or the next town. "She is beautiful," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She is perfect," Greta agreed, looking exhausted and radiant. "We made something perfect." Tessa proved to be a determined baby, stubborn and loud when displeased, charming when she wanted something. Vincent discovered a patience he had not known he possessed, walking the floor at midnight with a colicky infant, singing terrible lullabies that somehow worked. Greta returned to work as soon as she was able, bringing Tessa to the orchard in a sling, teaching their daughter about the trees and the land from infancy. Vincent watched them together and felt his heart expand with a love he could not put into words. When Tessa was 2, their son was born. They named him Victor, after Vincent's father, and he was everything his sister was not: quiet, contemplative, content to watch the world from his mother's arms. The 2 children could not have been more different, but they adored each other from the start. The house that had once been so empty filled with noise and life and chaos. Toys scattered across the floor, children's laughter echoing from the loft, tiny hands helping in the orchard and the workshop. It was messy and exhausting and perfect. One evening, when Tessa was 5 and Victor was 3, Vincent found Greta standing in the orchard at sunset, watching the children chase fireflies among the trees. "What are you thinking?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "That my mother would have loved this," Greta said softly. "The children, the thriving orchard, all of it. She worked so hard to keep this place alive, and sometimes I wish she could see what it has become." "She can," Vincent said. "In every tree we plant, every harvest we bring in, every time these children laugh, she is here." Greta leaned back against him. "You really believe that?" "I do." They stood together, watching their children play in the gathering dusk, the house warm and glowing behind them, the land stretching out in all directions. This was what Greta Denmar had fought for, what Greta had defended, what Vincent had chosen. Not just land or buildings or legal rights, but a home, a family, a legacy that would outlast them all. "You remember that first night?" Greta asked. "When I asked you to stay until morning? I remember thinking I would leave at dawn and never see you again. What changed?" Vincent considered. "I did. Or maybe I just finally became who I was supposed to be all along." He kissed the top of her head. "Either way, I am glad I stayed. So am I." The children ran to them then, Tessa demanding to be picked up, Victor tugging at Greta's skirt. They scooped up their son and daughter and headed inside together, a family complete and whole. The hearth was already burning when they entered, crackling cheerfully, filling the old stone house with warmth and light. Vincent had built that fire that morning, and it would burn through the night, and he would build it again tomorrow. Day after day, year after year, keeping the darkness at bay and the home fires burning. Just as he had promised, all those years ago, when a grieving orc woman had asked him to stay until morning, and he had chosen to stay forever. Years later, when both children were grown and working the land alongside them, when the orchard had expanded to twice its original size, when Vincent's hair had gone gray and Greta's tusks had worn smooth with age, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the hills they had built a life on. "Any regrets?" Greta would ask, not because she doubted but because she liked to hear him say it, and Vincent would take her hand, weathered and strong, and answer the same way every time. Not a single one. But that was years in the future. On this night, with the children finally asleep in the loft and the fire burning low, Vincent and Greta sat together by the hearth in the chairs that had borne witness to their beginning. The same chairs where he had kept vigil that first impossible night, where she had asked for so little and received so much. "Thank you," Greta said quietly. "For staying. Thank you for asking me to." She smiled and took his hand, and they sat in comfortable silence as the fire burned down to embers. Outside, the night settled over the hills like a blessing, and somewhere in the darkness the pear trees stood guard over the home that had almost been lost and was instead found, over the love that had grown from grief and gratitude into something unshakable. The house was not empty anymore. The hearth was tended, the land was loved, and the family that had seemed impossible on that first lonely night had become the most natural thing in the world, as permanent and necessary as the stones in the walls and the roots in the earth. Vincent had stayed until morning, as promised. And then he had stayed for all the mornings after, building a life one day at a time with the woman who had asked for so little and given him everything. In the end, it was the simplest and most profound truth. Love was not found in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in the choice to show up day after day, to sit vigil through the dark hours and trust that morning would come. And it always did, bringing with it new challenges and joys, sorrows and celebrations, all the messy, beautiful complexity of a life fully lived and deeply shared. The fire burned down to ash, and Vincent banked it carefully for the night, knowing he would rebuild it in the morning. Beside him, Greta stood and stretched, then held out her hand. "Come to bed," she said. He took her hand and let her lead him to the loft, to the life they had built together, to the future that stretched before them full of promise and possibility. The stone house settled into silence, warm and content, sheltering the family within its walls. And if the spirit of Greta Denmar walked among her beloved pear trees that night, blessing the holding that had passed to such worthy hands, no one was awake to see it. But the trees bloomed a little brighter the next spring, and the harvest was the best anyone could remember. And Greta swore she heard her mother's voice in the wind sometimes, singing those silly songs about rain and sunshine. Vincent never doubted it. In a house built on love and tended with care, anything seemed possible. And so the story that began with grief and a desperate request ended with joy and a promise kept, proof that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change everything, and that staying when it would be easier to leave is its own kind of courage. The hearth would never go dark in the Denmar house again. Not while Vincent drew breath to tend it and Greta stood beside him, and their children learned the art of keeping the home fires burning. Some vigils last only until morning. The best ones last a lifetime.